Today we're going to examine a familiar Old Testament story about two harlots who lived together and each gave birth to a child. But after one child died, they fought over the remaining child and took their dispute before King Solomon to resolve. One of the purposes of this story in the Bible is to show Solomon's unusual level of wisdom, but it also shows us something about God's compassion. To learn more, join me for today's episode of All Things Apostolic. Let's begin by reviewing the story. It's short, so I'm going to read 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 to 28. Then came there two women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight, and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thine son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. This story begins with two prostitutes who came to King Solomon to resolve their dispute. Brothels and prostitutes were a part of everyday life in the ancient Near Eastern world. The fact that they could actually come to Solomon and he handled their case judiciously indicates that even people of the lowest stature in society could get an audience with the king. According to biblical law, decisions could be determined on the basis of the witness of two people. But here it was clearly one woman's word against the other. Unfortunately, with the absence of other witnesses, there was no way to determine the legitimacy of either woman's claim. However, God had gifted Solomon with unusual wisdom, and he anticipated what would happen when he threatened to harm the child. It was then that the true mother's love was revealed through her self-sacrificing plea to let the child live. It is here that the English translations have a little difficulty conveying some of the nuances in Hebrew. In verse 26, after Solomon commanded to cut the child in half, Then the one who was really the mother spoke up, for her bowels yearned upon her son. The phrase "her bowels yearned" was actually a common expression for the keenest and strongest feeling. The Hebrew verb translated as yearned has a literal sense of to grow excessively warm. So it was like her heart was burning within her. In Hebrew, the word translated as bowels is rah-kham, and it is often translated in the Bible as compassion, mercy, or tender love. In fact, almost every use of rah-kham in the Bible is translated as compassion. That is the most common translation, but it is also accurate that the word is linked with this imagery of the womb because a womb provides life-giving protection and nurture. Rah-kham can refer to a womb or to a womb-like tenderness that moves someone to merciful action. The word is used in some scriptures to describe the character of God with divine compassion. When God reveals of himself in Exodus 34 that he is compassionate and gracious, he uses rah-kham. In Psalm 51, when David pleads with God to be gracious to him and to blot out his transgressions according to God's great compassion, David uses rah-kham. In our story of Solomon and the two women, the real mother exemplified true motherhood with rah-kham. Her compassion burned for her son, so she chose his life over her rightful claim to be his mother. Interestingly, the word rah-kham is in a plural form here, so linguistically the verse is literally saying her compassions. However, the writer of the book most likely used the plural form for emphasis and to reflect intensity rather than to mean it actually in a plural way. So we read it as compassion, but in the original it's plural to demonstrate the mother's intensity. The mother's intense compassion moved her to spare the child's life by being willing to give him to the other woman, even though it meant that she would have to surrender her right to raise her own precious child. In contrast, the other woman who falsely claimed to be the mother lacked the deep, self-sacrificing love of a true mother. On a side note, I mentioned already that rah-kham is one of the character traits of God. In Isaiah 49, the prophet speaks of Israel feeling like God had forsaken them and forgotten them. Then the Lord responded by saying through Isaiah, "Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee." The word compassion in that verse is rah-kham, and God was basically saying that his divine rah-kham surpasses even a mother's. His love for his people is that great. There is another nuance in the Hebrew that we wouldn't normally catch in English. Now, when we look at the reactions of the two women, they are very different. There are two words for no or not in Hebrew. They are al and lo. The word al usually expresses a temporary prohibition, whereas the word lo indicates a permanent prohibition. When the true mother said, "Oh my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it," she was saying by no means kill him. And she used the temporary prohibition al because she was saying to please don't kill him now. On the other hand, the other woman said, "Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it." It literally reads in the Hebrew, "Also to me, also to you, no. Let him be divided." And that no is lo in Hebrew. It's permanent. She was declaring that forever he won't be mine or yours. In essence, she was saying, if I can't have him, then no one will have him. And the verb in Hebrew is strikingly concise. It literally means to divide. And that's why it was so shocking when Solomon said it first. The true mother had been fighting for her child, but when she heard the king say, divide, that was all she had to hear, to sacrifice her own desires and her own rights for the life of her child. In her mercy and compassion, her desire for her child to live was greater than her desire to be the one to raise him. But the other woman didn't care. She was even being offered the child by the true mother. And she said that permanently he won't belong to you or me. Divide him. What a difference compared to the self-sacrificing love of the true mother. And another important point is how Solomon wisely handled the situation. One of the most important ways that wisdom is demonstrated is a keen understanding of human nature. Solomon demonstrated this by anticipating how a true mother would feel and react to the thought that her child might be killed, compared to someone who lacked that motherly instinct and compassion. In this short story, we see that true wisdom is not merely intellectual. It discerns the heart. Solomon's judgment reveals that genuine love is proven through self-sacrifice, not selfish claim. The true mother's rah-kham, her deep, burning compassion, mirrors the very character of God, who is also moved by compassion and mercy toward his people. Because God is compassionate, he expects his people to mirror that compassion. Ultimately, the wisdom of God leads not only to right decisions, but to the transformation of the human heart, so we can be more compassionate like him. So this passage challenges us to consider whether our own love reflects that same willingness to yield for the good of others. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of All Things Apostolic, and until next time, take care and God bless.